Hey, it's Tom here from houseplant.com. Today we're talking about the lady palm, otherwise known as the Rhapis Excelsa. So thank you very much for tuning in today. We're going to be talking about the lady palm. Right, this is a great palm, I'd say. If you're looking for something a little bit unusual, this is the beast you want. This is the one, maybe. It's I'd say I've owned quite a few palms over the years, and yeah, this is definitely the easiest. Absolutely the easiest. It's, do I want to say easy? Yeah, I do want to say easy. It's a very easy house plant. If you're fortunate enough to have one, then great. I think you're not going to be disappointed. If you are watching this video and maybe you're curious about this plant and you want one, well, I wish you luck in your search. They're not rare house plants, but you're going to struggle to find one, in my opinion. I don't know why. They're just so good, honestly. They're so good plants. If you see one and it's a decent price, I would urge you or suggest or maybe even push you to get it because they're great. We're going to get onto the care stuff and you'll see why as the video goes on. It has three common names that you'll probably see it labeled or go by. A lady palm is probably the most common and most well used. It may sometimes go as the broadleaf palm, which you can tell from it. Both those names come from the way that they look like fingers and they're quite broad. If you compare with a normal palm, the fronds are very wide open. They look like your hands opening, which is where those names come from. And sometimes you'll see it labeled as the bamboo palm because of the sort of bamboo nature of the main stems. There are some other house plants and other palms which also have that name, so it can be a little bit confusing. But I think lady palm is probably what you're going to come across, and that's what I'm going to call it. When it comes to its light requirements, it's going to be really difficult to go wrong. They can put up with a broad range, including some low light conditions as well. It will cope with that, and I've had it in some pretty dark places in my home, and it's still with me today. It's a slow growing plant no matter what you do with it. If it's low light, it's going to be even slower, but it depends what you're going for. If you're happy with the plant you buy and you think the size of it is pretty decent, then it's not going to really matter too much if it doesn't grow very fast. But yeah, low light levels, it can cope with those. It will be okay. It's not ideal. It's not really what you should provide because no plant really wants to be in a low light position ultimately. But this will accept such a location. It can put up with medium light and bright light. Full intense sunlight might be a little bit too harsh and you can get some damage to the leaves if it's too strong. So do bear that in mind. Full sun is probably something you should try and keep away from. But if you really want to give it a go, you can possibly test it out and see what happens. If you notice any yellowing on the leaves or any burn marks, you need to pull it back. You need to put it into a darker spot. But yeah, it's very adaptable and you probably, I say this because there's bound to be a position where you shouldn't grow this, but you're probably going to struggle to find a place where it won't be happy. I pull him down because he just wants to look at the camera and not be on my lap, which is understandable. Okay, watering. Let's talk about the watering levels. Right, this is something you need to be a little bit more careful of, and you probably want to get this down because if you get it wrong, you're going to start to notice some problems, which we will cover later on in the video because I'm not perfect with this plant and I have made mistakes. So I'll be sharing what those are so you learn. But yeah, the watering, they want to be moist pretty much all year round. The potting medium needs to be damp. By all means, please do let it dry out a little bit between waterings, that's fine, but they don't like to dry out completely. That's something to avoid. What happens if you do that is that they droop and they take on a very slightly washed out appearance, but the fronds kind of bend up. If you've had it a little while, you'll know when it needs watering. It just kind of flumps ever so slightly. It's not like a peace lily or anything like that, but if you're observant, you'll know, you'll see it straight away. And you can go into the room and I'll be like, oh no, it needs water, and it's completely dry. And the problem with watering is these are thirsty plants. They are thirsty. It's probably one of my most thirstiest plants for its location. It's not in a bright location. It's not particularly hot. It's not particularly bright with light, but it still uses a lot of water. And yeah, I think you're going to find that as well. They drink quite a bit. You could be looking to water maybe once or twice in summer when it is bright and it is warmer generally. And then the rest of the year is probably once a week. And yeah, that's quite consistent. That's for me. That's my experiences. Your experiences are going to be different. You may need to water it slightly more, slightly less, but just go with your experiences. So let it dry out a little bit and then water it again. I feel like you can't see the top of the plant and you're not getting a fair representation here. It doesn't fit in. I don't know where to put it. It's too, I might put it on the floor. Yeah, maybe I'll change it over in the next clip and we'll see what that looks like. Let's try that. Let's see what it looks like with it on the floor. It didn't look very good on the floor either. So it's on the table. So we'll try it like this for a little while. Okay, so let's talk about the temperature, the humidity, and feeding. Right, temperature. Okay, so the plant is pretty adaptable. It can cope with some reasonably colder temperatures, but you want to bring it inside. If you had it outside, that's usually when the temperature is going to be a problem. So if you had it outside during the summer, say, once the temperature starts to go lower, if you live in part of the world where you have cold temperatures, you want to bring it back in when you get down to around 10 degrees Celsius, which is this much Fahrenheit. It can cope with colder temperatures than that, so you could leave it out there for longer, but the foliage can be quite easily damaged. And as a running theme with this plant is it's slow growing. So any damage that occurs to the fronds means you're going to have a plant that doesn't look great for quite a while before it essentially grows out, I suppose. Or new growth replaces what you've removed or what's been damaged. So yes, when it gets cold, bring it inside to be safe. There isn't really an upper temperature. They can cope with, it's a tropical plant, so it can cope with some pretty warm temperatures. But in the average home, you're not going to run into any difficulties, really, in my opinion. It just might need to be watered a little bit more regularly in very warm temperatures. If the humidity is very low, you might end up with brown edges and brown tips. The reason this has brown tips is for another reason. It's not because of humidity, it's because of an underwatering issue, which we'll cover soon. But yeah, you may notice lots of browning, and that could be a sign of very, very low humidity. The leaves are quite leathery. They're not susceptible to really low humidity problems. It's hard to describe. You need to, I mean, I don't know if you can hear it, or I'll show you some more footage, but the leaves are really kind of just, they don't feel like they're not very thick. They're just very leathery almost. They're not a type of plant that is going to have humidity problems. Feeding is pretty straightforward as well. They're not heavy feeders. They don't need excessive amounts of feed. You could probably get away with doing it once a quarter, so 4 times a year is probably enough. You can feed them more regularly if you would like to, just weekly. Don't feed them weekly, but just feed them weekly. A weak solution. I hope that came across okay. So yeah, less often basically. You don't want to go crazy with it because of the risk of fertilizer burn. They're not consuming huge amounts of feed, so don't overdo it. So let's talk about repotting. They are slow growing. Yes, they are. They are slow growing, but they do fill their pots. The roots are quite vigorous and they do need to be repotted occasionally. Not all the time. You don't need to be doing it every year, but I've had this plant. I probably said at the start of the video, I cannot remember what I told you, but I've had it 4 years, coming up to 5 years now, and I probably repotted it about twice, maybe 3 times during that period. So it's not a crazy amount repotting, but every couple of years, you're probably going to need to put it into a slightly larger container or pot. You don't have to, and if your plant is not growing at all and it's not filling the pot in the slightest, then you don't need to. But yeah, every couple of years is probably what you're going to look into do. Pot and soil, I just use normal stuff. No, nothing fancy. You don't need anything special for these plants. The roots are not fragile. They're not weak. They want something quite substantial. So normal, just standard everyday pot and soil is probably absolutely fine. I don't mean soil or dirt, like some people call it, from the yard. I don't mean things like that. I just, something substantial, something good quality, but just normal pot and compost, basically. You can buy it from most garden centres or nurseries, that kind of stuff will be absolutely fine here. Yeah, and if you are really concerned about overwatering, if you're known overwatering your house plants, you can put some grit in just to give it a bit more drainage. Let's talk about problems quick. What can go wrong? Okay, so brown tips. I've been banging on about this for a lot of the video. Brown tips are quite common and they are almost always caused by underwatering. So that's easily resolved, right? Maybe, but it's something to bear in mind. Okay, so you see the brown tips, probably most likely underwatering. If you know that you're watering your plant perfectly, then it could also be caused by low humidity. Less likely, but still possible. Next issue I would say is dust. These leaves get dirty. They attract dust quite badly. Yeah, this plant gets washed more than probably any other house plant in my collection. I don't know why, they just attract dust. You can do it with a cloth and just wipe them. In my opinion, that's a bit time consuming. I just don't really like that sort of thing when it takes ages to do. So I pop them in the shower and just give them a rinse, and that cleans off the leaves. So that's what I would recommend. That's what I do, but you can still wipe them with a cloth. That's absolutely cool as well. Yeah, and then finally, yeah, so the fronds don't last forever. They do die off eventually, but rather than go yellow, they tend to go brown pretty quickly, and they turn into brown. I left them on here specifically so I could show you some brown leaves to show you that I don't have a perfect plant. But it will be perfect when I finish, because I'm going to cut them off. That's all you have to do, literally. Cut them off, and you're good to go. Okay, so that's it for this video. If you have a problem with your plant that I've not covered, please ask below. If you've got any feedback about this plant generally, any tips for me, anything you want to tell me about how you grow yours, I'd love to hear from you. Let me know again in the comments or drop me a message. And that's it for this video. As always, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate your time, and I will see you in the next video.